For months, WWE fans demanded answers, and now we finally have them. Bianca Belair has officially broken her silence after suffering one of the scariest injuries of her entire career. But what she reveals next, nobody saw coming. From backstage fears to her shocking comeback plan, this might be the most emotional update Bianca has ever shared. Stay with me, because the real story behind her injury is far more intense than WWE ever showed on TV. To understand the weight of this moment, we have to go back to the second the cameras stopped rolling. In the world of professional wrestling, we are conditioned to believe that pain is temporary. We see our heroes take monumental falls, crash through tables, and absorb impacts that would shatter a normal person, only to see them rise up before the referee counts to 3. We view them as invincible, almost cartoonish in their resilience. But every now and then, a moment occurs that pierces through the veil of entertainment and reminds us of the fragile humanity beneath the superhero cape. That is exactly what happened to the EST of WWE. When Bianca Belair was taken out of action, the arena didn't just go quiet. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the building. It wasn't part of the script, and if it was executed with a terrifying realism that left children in the front row in tears and grown men checking Twitter for legitimate medical updates. The image of Bianca, usually the strongest, fastest, and toughest woman in the room, being helped to the back, unable to put weight on her leg, was a jarring visual that the WWE universe wasn't prepared for. But the scariest part wasn't the injury itself. It was the silence that followed. Usually, in the modern era of social media, we know everything instantly. Dirt sheets leak MRI results before the wrestler even leaves the hospital, but this time, nothing. Bianca's social media, usually a vibrant collage of workouts, fashion, and positivity, went dark. The silence was deafening. It created a vacuum where fear and speculation began to grow. Was this a work? Was it a career-threatening injury? Fans began to replay the footage, frame by frame, analyzing the torque on her knee, the way her head hit the mat, looking for clues that weren't there. This period of the unknown is where the true drama of this story begins. It wasn't just about a wrestler missing a pay-per-view, it was about the sudden disappearance of a cultural icon. Stickman figures on a screen might represent the action, but the emotion here was heavy and real. Imagine the feeling of being at the top of the mountain, the face of a division, and in one split second, the ground gives way beneath you. You aren't just falling, you are vanishing. The weeks turned into a month. The rumors started to swirl, some saying she needed surgery that would keep her out for a year, others whispering that the mental toll of the attack had shaken her confidence. The WWE moved on, as the machine always does, booking new feuds and crowning new contenders. But a shadow hung over the division, a Bianca-sized hole that no one else could fill. And just when people began to accept that the EST might be gone for a long time, the silence broke. But it didn't break with a shout or a generic press release. It broke with a confession that changed the way we look at her legacy forever. When the lights of the arena fade and the adrenaline of the performance wears off, the reality of an injury sets in with a brutal coldness. While fans were debating storylines on Reddit, Bianca Belair was living a very different reality within the four walls of her home. This is the part of the story that wrestling television rarely shows us. They show the impact, and they show the return, but they skip the agonizing middle. This is the chapter of the story defined by vulnerability. Bianca has built her entire persona around being the EST, the strongest, the fastest, the roughest, the toughest, the best. It is a gimmick, yes, but it is also a declaration of excellence. It is a burden of perfection. When you tell the world you are the best at everything, you are not allowed to be weak. You are not allowed to be fragile. So, when Bianca finally spoke about those first few weeks at home, the confession was startling. She wasn't just in physical pain, she was in an identity crisis. She revealed that for the first time in her career, she felt useless. Imagine that word coming from a woman who has main evented WrestleMania. Useless. She described sitting on her couch, unable to train, unable to run, watching the show continue without her. It wasn't jealousy. It was a profound sense of displacement. In the minimalist animation of our minds, picture a figure who is always in motion, running, lifting, fighting, suddenly frozen in static gray. That stillness is terrifying for an elite athlete. The emotional weight of this hiatus fell heavily on her support system as well. We often forget that these superstars have families. Bianca spoke candidly about the role her husband, Montez Ford, played during this dark timeline. He wasn't just a husband. He became a caretaker and a psychological anchor. There were nights, she admitted, where the doubt crept in so deep she wondered if she had lost the step. You see, in wrestling, timing is everything. If you lose a fraction of your speed, or a percentage of your strength, you can hurt yourself, or, worse, hurt someone else. The fear wasn't just about the injury healing, it was about whether the EST could ever truly exist again. This backstage conflict, the war between the person, Bianca Crawford, and the character, Bianca Belair, was the real battle. The doctors can stitch up a wound or rehab a knee, but they cannot surgically repair confidence. She spoke of avoiding her wrestling gear, leaving it packed in her travel bag in the corner of the room, because looking at it was too painful. It represented a life she had been forcefully ejected from. The pressure of her legacy began to mount. She saw other women stepping up, claiming spots she had worked years to secure. In the cutthroat world of WWE, you don't own your spot. You rent it, and the rent is paid in performance. If you can't perform, you are evicted. This anxiety fueled a transformation in her. She realized that sitting around waiting for the doctors to clear her wasn't enough. She needed to rebuild her mind before she could even think about stepping between the ropes. The scary part of the injury wasn't the bone or the ligament. It was the realization of how quickly it could all be taken away. This fear, instead of breaking her, became the fuel for a shocking new plan. The turning point came not in a wrestling ring, but through a camera lens. When Bianca finally decided to address the world, the media chaos was instant. Every wrestling news outlet, every podcast, and every YouTube channel was ready to dissect her words. But what she delivered wasn't a promo. It wasn't a scripted segment written by a team of writers in Stamford, Connecticut. It was raw, unpolished, and deeply human. She released a video update that stripped away the glitz and glamour. No pyro, no entrance music, no long braid twirling, just Bianca, looking directly into the camera. The visual shift was immediate and jarring for fans used to seeing the superhero. This was the human being. In this update, she dropped the bombshell that hooked us all. She admitted that she had considered walking away. Not just taking a break, but retiring. The shockwave that statement sent through the fanbase was palpable. The idea that the Est, in the prime of her career, had looked in the mirror and thought, "I might be done," was unfathomable. She explained that the injury had triggered a revaluation of her life. She spoke about the sacrifices, the time away from family, and the toll on her body. It was a moment of heavy emotional immersion for the viewer. We suddenly realized that we aren't entitled to these athletes' bodies forever. But then, the narrative shifted. The sorrow in her voice was replaced by something harder, something colder. She began to talk about the disrespect. During her absence, rivals had mocked her. They had used her injury as a punchline to build their own heat. They mistook her silence for weakness. They thought the Est was broken, and in that video, we saw the flicker of a fire that we hadn't seen before. This wasn't the happy-go-lucky skipping to the ring Bianca. This was a woman who had been cornered. She revealed that while the world thought she was feeling sorry for herself, she had actually been studying. She had been watching every match, every promo, every insult thrown her way. She wasn't just recovering, she was compiling a list. The shocking revelation was that her time off hadn't made her rusty. It had made her obsessive. She spoke of a new training regimen, one that didn't focus on flashiness or athleticism, but on durability and aggression. The fan reaction shifted from sympathy to anticipation. The narrative arc bent from tragedy to a revenge thriller. Social media exploded with theories. Was she coming back as a heel? Was she going to change her look? The ambiguity was the hook. She didn't give a date. She didn't name a specific opponent. She just promised that the version of Bianca Belair returning to WWE would be unrecognizable compared to the one who left. This chapter of the story highlights the power of controlling the narrative. By breaking her silence on her own terms, Bianca took the power back from the rumor mill. She didn't let the dirt sheets define her injury. She defined it herself. She turned a moment of weakness into a psychological weapon. The world was no longer asking, "Is she okay?" They were now asking, with a mix of excitement and dread, "What is she going to do when she gets her hands on them?" The stage was set for a return that would be less about wrestling and more about retribution. The shocking comeback plan wasn't just a marketing slogan. It was a fundamental shift in philosophy. As the weeks ticked closer to her medical clearance, whispers from the Performance Center began to leak out. Sources described Bianca's training sessions as intense and scary. She wasn't practicing her usual high-flying maneuvers, or the dazzling displays of agility that made her famous. She was brawling. She was focusing on ground and pound, on submission holds, on a style of wrestling that was far more vicious than the EST brand usually offered. In our cinematic retelling, imagine a montage of a stickman figure in a dark gym. No spotlight, no crowd, just the sound of heavy breathing and bodies hitting the mat. Bianca was deconstructing her own style. She realized that her reliance on being the best athlete had made her a target. It made her predictable. Everyone knew she would go for the 450 splash. Everyone knew she would try to outpower them. Her injury was a result of that predictability. Her opponent had scouted her, anticipated her heroism, and used it to break her. So, the plan was simple. Kill the hero. This doesn't necessarily mean turning heel or becoming a villain in the traditional sense. It meant shedding the need to be liked. It meant shedding the need to entertain. Bianca's plan was to return as a pragmatic dismantling machine. She revealed in later interviews that she stopped listening to the crowd reactions during her rehab simulations. She stopped caring if the move looked pretty. She only cared if it was effective. The emotional weight of this change cannot be overstated. For a character whose entire identity is wrapped up in being a role model for young girls, deciding to embrace a darker, more violent edge is a massive risk. It creates a backstage conflict with management, who wants to sell lunchboxes and t-shirts, but Bianca stood firm. She argued that she couldn't protect her legacy if she couldn't protect herself. The injury had traumatized her in a way that required this evolution. The plan also involved a calculated silence regarding her return date. WWE usually advertises big returns weeks in advance to sell tickets. Bianca refused. She wanted the element of surprise. She wanted the person who injured her to feel safe, to feel comfortable, to think they had gotten away with it. This psychological warfare was a new layer to her game. It added a thriller element to the weekly television programming. Every time a segment ended, fans watched the entrance ramp, waiting. This chapter is about the anticipation of violence. It's about the calm before the storm. The recovery was over. The physical therapy was done. The mental hardening was complete. Bianca Belair was no longer the injured victim. She was a hunter lying in wait. The narrative tension was stretched to its breaking point. The fans knew she was back in the building. The roster knew she was back in the building. But nobody knew which version of her was going to walk through the curtain. The suspense was a masterclass in storytelling, proving that sometimes, what you don't see is far more terrifying than what you do. The moment finally arrived. It didn't happen at a major pay-per-view or with a massive pyrotechnics display. It happened on a random Tuesday, during a segment where her rival was bragging in the center of the ring. The music didn't hit immediately. There was no whip-crack sound effect to signal her entrance. Just the sudden dimming of the lights. When they came back up, Bianca was standing behind her rival. The crowd erupted, a deafening roar of relief and excitement. But then, the twist happened. The realization rippled through the arena. Bianca wasn't smiling. She wasn't skipping. She wasn't playing to the crowd. She stood perfectly still, her eyes locked on the target. The visual storytelling was stark. The colorful, vibrant gear was gone, replaced by darker, more utilitarian attire. The signature braid was there, but she didn't use it as a prop. It was tied back, out of the way, strictly business. This was the twist that adds depth to the viral moment. We expected a triumphant return of the hero. We got the arrival of a warrior. The beatdown that followed was uncomfortable to watch. It wasn't a wrestling match, it was a receipt. Bianca unleashed months of frustration, pain, and isolation onto her opponent. The commentary team, usually hyping the action, went somber, selling the aggression as something dangerous. But the true reflection, the ending note of our story, lies in what happened after the ring cleared. Bianca grabbed the microphone. Fans expected a catchphrase. They expected, "I'm back," or "You can't stop the EST." Instead, she looked at the camera, breathless, and simply said, "I'm not here to be the best anymore. I'm here to be the last one standing." She dropped the mic and walked away. No music, no celebration. This ending redefines everything we thought we knew about her injury. It wasn't a setback, it was a metamorphosis. The injury killed the entertainer and birthed the champion who understands the cruel reality of the business. The twist is that the fans got what they wanted. They got Bianca back, but they lost the innocent, invincible superhero they thought they knew. They realized that the trauma of the injury had taken something from her that couldn't be As the screen fades to black on our story, we are left with a lingering question. Is this new Bianca better? She is certainly more dangerous. She is certainly more focused. But the warmth is gone. The story of Bianca Belair's scary injury isn't a story of recovery. It's a story of sacrifice. She sacrificed a piece of her soul to ensure her body would never be broken again. And as she walks up the ramp, fading into the shadows of the backstage area, we realize that while the est is back, the girl who just wanted to show the world she was great, she might be gone forever. And that is the most shocking, emotional reality of all.